Hey, what's happening, you guys? This is Coach Joel, and today I don't have my co-host, Coach Emily. She is hanging back, hanging with her son. Her son's not feeling too good today, and that's totally okay. Because we got Rockstar on the podcast today. I'm very excited to bring on our guest today. Yet before we begin, if you are listening to this podcast for the first time, thank you for listening. You can also watch this live on our Facebook page, The Proclivity Method. We love giving out our information here at Proclivity. We truly believe in helping create healthier bodies and happier lives. And we do that by giving out all of our content. All our proprietary information is in our blogs, is in our podcasts, because we truly believe in being able to help you. So if you find any value in listening to our podcast, please like, share, subscribe, review. All these things really help us to be able to spread the message. And that is our biggest thing, is being able to help people create those healthier bodies and happier lives. When you're living a happy life, guess what? Usually you're going to have a very healthy body. And today, we're going to be talking about what's in between the ears. We say at Proclivity, there's two things you do more than anything else. One, breathe. Two, your dialogue. What you think to yourself, what you say to yourself, and what you say to others. And so it's vitally important that what's happening in between the ears aligns with the actions that we're taking. And there are some of us, all of us, who can have limiting beliefs that keep us pulled back. Stories that we've repeated time and time and time again that make us create an identity of who we are. Yet do we question that enough? And when we start questioning that and we get curious, we can actually start breaking free from those unlimiting beliefs or those limiting beliefs. And we can find the identity that we truly want to step into. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. So let's get this on the show. I'm very excited to bring on our guest today. Michael Armstrong comes from a lineage of storytellers. Born to a mother who was a career Shakespeare theater director and a father who was a novelist and voice actor, it led Michael to attending one of the top film schools in the world at USC and started 1111 Productions with his first documentary, get this, I love this, The Cosmic Giggle, which has now been viewed over 500,000 times on YouTube. Michael has worked with artists, actors, healers, educators, scientists, businessmen, and women and community leaders in an effort to share the unique stories of each one and the healing power that stories have to the world. Michael is an incredibly unique man, and I am very excited for all of you to meet him. So without further ado, bring him on to the show, Michael Armstrong.
Fantastic. That was a hell of an introduction.
Dude, and you're clear. We were having some connection issues a little bit. And he is clear as day. And that's how we do it around here. We throw a little bit of abracadabra, as you all know, in Proclivity, with our words we create. And Mike and I said, hey, you know, we're going to start this and things are just going to clear right up. And guess what?
It's going to sprinkle a little magic.
Bang. And here we are. And here we are.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So when reading through your bio, one of the things that I actually didn't know about you was how ingrained you were into theater, that your dad was a voiceover or a voice actor. Like
a voice actor. He's an interesting man because his money-making job is he prints election ballots for a living. But my mom was running this theater for 25 years and he was helping with it. And he also is like a voice actor, like very into theater on the side. He's like a poet writer really. And, written, I think like 4 or 5 novels now.
Wow.
Yeah. So, my parents were analyzing Shakespeare plays in the living room when I was a kid, and like talking about like the plot arcs and like what's the motivation behind each character and like why is this scene in the play. So it's really like couched in that from super young. Yeah.
Wow. And that creates this ingrained like thought pattern and process of creativity and openness and expansion of being able to go, well, what if? And how come? The whole process of what we teach in proclivity is curiosity over conflict. What if we just got
Mm-hmm.
curious about everything instead of getting so conflicting about
Mm.
everything? What would happen then? And so you had that at a young age.
Yeah, yeah, and like something that I've been realizing over time, and which you're actually making me realize on a deeper level right now as you're talking, is like that it's very easy to like surrender to that curiosity when we engage with fiction. It's like when we go to the movie theater and we sit down in front of a movie, it's like we put all the boundaries down. We're like, I'm just going to receive this because I'm like in this state where it's like I'm just open to like what this story is. But we feel really differently about the stories of our own lives. We get really attached and like really locked into those like conflict stories, and this idea that we could rewrite it. Because like in one level, like it is just we're writing the movie of our lives like all the time as we're living it. But yeah, there can be sticky things and how to get to that.
I oh man, you guys, there's gonna be so many dimes that are gonna be dropped. I'm not even say dimes. I'm gonna say $100 bills are gonna be dropped today, and that's one of them. If we could change right our mindset of being able to go, I'm writing my story, and we're living our story as if it was fiction, and the incredible way that we could feel being the hero of our own story. Man, that's something. Now, I'm curious. You got into film school, right? I mean, this has
Yes.
been stories have been part of your life. Fiction, nonfiction, all of it. Did you always know that you wanted to capture stories, tell other people's stories? What what brought you to what you're doing now with 1111 Productions?
Mm. Yeah, great question. Yeah, in terms of did I always know that I wanted to capture stories? No, I knew from pretty young that I wanted to be an artist of some kind, and I was really into drawing and painting, like in middle school and high school. And I was good at it, and I had people encouraging me to do that more. But I always had this sense of like being a professional artist in that kind of way is like it's a pretty isolated path. Like most of the people that were role models in that world, it's like they just maybe they go out and like share their work or they have gallery showings, but their work is like in the studio alone, like creating art. And I was like, there's something that I do like walking down that life path is like not something I want. And my mom was in the theater, but and so I was like immersed in that. But at the same time, she was always like, "Don't go into theater," like always growing up. She was like, "Don't go into theater. It's
Yeah.
terrible money. It's like really stressful." My mom got breast cancer twice from running this theater because
Wow.
she was the artistic director and also the executive director, doing all the fundraising and all of that, and
Whoa.
just so slammed by stress. And yeah, I got breast cancer. And both times it was like best case scenario. But after the second time, she like maxed out on her lifetime radiation levels, and she was like, I can't do this anymore, so I have to stop. And so she was like, don't go into theater.
Yeah.
and uh, yeah, and then I took a summer class at USC Film School, and it's just a simple like over the summer going and learning from these professors, making like these very very basic kind of like sketch films. And that was the first time I really like tried. I had made like little stop animation movies when I was a kid and stuff like that, but it was the first time I was like, oh, let me explore this possibility of like
Right.
filmmaking as a thing. And during that summer class, I was like, this is what I want to do forever. And it was like so clear. I was like, yep,
Wow.
this is my path that I'm going to walk.
Right. Right.
And then it's gone through an interesting evolution. And the pandemic actually really like shifted a lot for me in terms of like how I am looking at that, because I made the Cosmic Giggle right out of film school. Our dear friend Mark England is in it, and connecting with him was a big part of the start of this journey. And through making documentaries, I started to see, at first I went to film school because I was into narrative movies because I've been so moved by all these different films that, I had seen. And I was like, okay, I want to make stuff like that. I want to make movies like Darren Aronofsky and like,
Yeah.
Denis Villeneuve and those guys. And then going through film school, I realized like how much of a machine Hollywood is, and how much I thought I was going to an art school, but I was really going to a producing school, or like a school to crank out employees for the studio system. And I saw like even in the microcosm, like USC is like a little microcosm snapshot of Hollywood. And there's a lot of things about the way that the school operates that are reflective of like the politics of Hollywood. And like I saw how I had friends who like, there's like a senior thesis film that there's like only 4 that get made every year. And like anybody from the whole university, even outside the film school, can like write scripts and submit it into it. And I watched this process of like how so many of my friends would like write these really creative, like super innovative, really interesting scripts, and they would not get picked. And the teachers would pick these like very safe stories to demonstrate, And I started to see is like, oh, the reason I got into this was because like I wanted to bust people's minds open. I want to show people things that they've never seen before, help them like liberate themselves from their limiting beliefs, like through movies. That was why I got into it. And I started to see it's like, oh, there's a certain amount of like political permission giving that has to happen before you can get to a point. And there's actually very, very few directors working in Hollywood today who like are in a position where they can really say, I'm going to make this story and then it will happen. It's like all this like machinery that goes into the decision making of like what movies get made. And so that really like kind of soured me on it. And I started going into documentaries and like realizing like, oh, there's like these real stories of like things that are happening, and I can share these kinds of stories. And then I went on this whole journey of like self-development and personal development and like meeting all these amazing people through the documentary work. And I started to realize like, oh, I'm starting to like understand a lot of this stuff because I'm not only going and meeting all these experts, but then spending hours and hours editing their footage and like getting super deep in it.
Yeah.
And then during the pandemic, I decided to reach out to Mark and do this certification for the Unlifted coaching method.
That's right.
And that was like kind of stepping to this deeper level, because like this whole time I had been focused on like, it's like there's the outer like fiction stories and then the documentaries, but that's still like this outer storytelling. And then I started to realize that when I would go and do projects for clients, like oftentimes I would do like my best job possible with like how I would execute on the filmmaking aspects. But then the project would still end up like shit, And what I realized is that it was the inner stories that were operating on the part of the leadership or on the part of the clients, that were blocking like a good story being told in an outer way. And then starting to do the story coaching method with people, going into people's nervous systems, going into people's like block limiting beliefs. It's like when that cracks open, it's like, oh, now the outer storytelling becomes really easy. And it's like, oh, if you're really stuck and struggling with like, okay, how do I tell the story of my life's purpose or my mission or my company's mission? It's often like, oh, there's like an inner blockage happening. And once that inner blockage gets open, then it just can flow because you're in this like clear alignment. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now with my work, is helping people to develop really powerful outer stories, but through first going into the inner stories and unlocking that and understanding it as like, the inner and the outer being a whole system that's interconnected.
Gosh, again, so much, guys, to be able to listen to Michael's story, how he came to doing this documentary. Him and I actually, the reason that we know each other is we know each other from Unlifted. And Michael has coached me, and I have coached Michael. And that's the incredible part in the Unlifted Method. And if you guys don't know the Unlifted Method, check it out. If that's something that you're interested in, definitely check it out. And being able to dive into those stories, getting in deep into those stories, exactly what Michael is saying, we start clearing out that central nervous system. And we talk about that in proclivity. When that central nervous system is bogged down, tight, wound up, it's going to be really hard for you to lose weight. It's going to be really hard to have a fluid relationship. It's going to be really hard to believe in yourself, to love yourself. When we start opening those doors, we start releasing those things, we feel lighter, physically, literally. We just did it today with a group. We took them through the imposter. We let them speak to their imposter. They went from heavy and bogged down to completely light, physically feeling light. And this is what we're going to talk about today, guys. We're going to be talking about those stories. And if you're listening, you know those stories. Those stories that you don't tell anyone. Maybe those stories that you feel ashamed about. Maybe those stories that you feel guilty about. Maybe those stories that you got really hurt in. We're going to talk about those stories because those stories matter. Because that is what creates that limiting belief about yourself. I can never lose weight. I'm just a person that always has to keep going. I'm unlovable. Whatever the limiting belief that you have, it starts with a story. And Michael's going to walk us through. We're going to talk a lot about these stories coming in here. Yet before we get into that, Michael, I do have one more question. You've done documentary, you've done film school, the film was part of your life. Can you tell me, speaking of stories, one very powerful moment in filming that made a lasting impact on you?
Like in my own productions?
Yeah.
Yeah. A moment that made a really lasting impact on me. Yeah, I would say I think the one that comes up, it's not so much a moment, but and this will tie into what we're going to talk about the limiting stories too,
Yeah.
because there's a way that you know doing this story coaching method is really powerful with people who are open to like a what I could call like a magical consciousness, for lack of a better word,
Mm-hmm.
like open to seeing things from a kind of like dream awareness, because when you're in a dream, like you're just seeing things on this kind of symbolic level. It's like your subconscious is like surfacing images, and it's like you're perceiving a story, and there's no questioning of like, does this make sense like in a logical way?
Mm-hmm.
And I had this experience working on a short film. It was a friend of mine doing it, and um, it was just like it was just such an intense feeling of um, like healing through magic is the words that want to come, but it's like
Mm-hmm.
healing through the like symbolic repair of like actions that were happening in her life and like in the lives of the people around us. And like it was wild. She read this story. It was pretty simple. It was the true story of how her dad found out that he was adopted when his mother died, and he was like in his 40s. And then
Whoa.
like he started going through like all of like her stuff like after she died, and he found this like journal from when he was being born, and like started going through it and seeing things that were like worded weirdly, that were like
Mm-hmm.
oh, I can't wait to bring our baby home, or like just things that were
Mm.
worded in a way that you wouldn't say if it was like you were pregnant with a
Yeah.
baby.
Right. Right.
And he asked his dad, and his dad was like, yeah, you're adopted, but I promised your mother that we would never tell you, but now that she's dead, I'll tell you. And
Mm.
so he found this out, and my friend made this movie. There's a story of this happening, and in the movie, she's playing her own mother, who she had a super strained relationship with, and like our friend who is playing her dad, who she has like a real attraction with happening like in real life. And like at the same time as this is happening, her roommate is like reconnecting with his birth parents who he had never met because he was adopted. And so there's like this kind of crazy like kaleidoscoping of like this weird crossover between like what was happening in reality and then
Yeah.
what was happening in the story that we were telling and like enacting through this process. And it was just like this, just like all this like emotional healing happened. And like her roommate had this like amazing, like beautiful repair with his family and like reconnected with them and like found out that they never wanted to abandon him in the first place, you know? And
Right.
like, just, there was all these events that happened. It was like, whoa, there's like this power unfolding from us, like stepping into this framework of like seeing life as this kind of like dream consciousness that then we can like capture snippets of it through the camera and then like show it to other people. There's something like, there's just something very trippy and like weird that happens when you step into that kind of framing with making movies and with storytelling in general.
Oh my gosh. It, and it goes back to, again, like what you said in the beginning in terms of like viewing your life as it were a story or a movie. We so quickly can switch like, oh, it's a movie, you know, and you know, dysregulate or move away from that, and for the good and for the bad, right? And so let's get into stories, because we know how important it is, how important stories are when it comes to creating these limiting beliefs. Yet I want to hear it from you. So as we always start off with proclivity, we start off with the nitty gritty. What are stories, and how do they have an impact on us?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, and this is something I've been thinking about for 10 years since I've known Mark England. And I mean, even before that, but yeah, what are stories and how do they impact us? You know, I come to see it as like, and Tony Robbins has this framing that I love, which is that he had these like three S's, you know, which is like the strategy of like how you approach things that you do in life, your story, which is your story is about who you are and your identity, and then your state and like your energetic state of being. And like those are in reverse order of importance. So it's like state comes first, then the story, then the strategy, you know. And it's like this plays out like in the work that you do, you know. It's like the breath, it's like getting into the nervous system, shifting the state, then going into changing the story and unwriting the limiting beliefs, and then we go into strategy of like what's your weight loss program, you know, whatever the thing is that
That's
somebody
right.
wants to change.
That's right.
And I've come to see it as it's like the nervous system is the key. It's like getting into the nervous system is the key, but the stories are the access point into the nervous system. And like the specific language has ways that it can like unlock things like in our bodies because it's been coded into us, you know. And I don't know, I don't know if it's like how much of it is like cultural, like how much of it is like we grow up in an environment with language and then, you know, we learn to like absorb and understand things through that, and how much of it is like genetic, because we do have a genetic part of our brain that is like built for understanding words. And that's like a curiosity that I have. But you know, there's definitely a direct link between like stories and then access in the nervous system. And then again, it's like we experience this all the time, like when we watch movies. It's like we go to movies because it's a story that's going to activate something in our nervous system. It's like we want to have an experience, we want to feel the, you know, the tragic fall and the comeback that the hero has, or we want to feel like that burst of laughter from like something ironic happening or whatever it is. um yeah, it's the stories are this gateway like into our nervous system. And yeah, how it works is like it's mysterious, man. Like I don't fully understand it, and I've like tried to kind of grill Mark on this. I mean, he's been focused on this single topic like for so long, for his whole
Yeah.
career basically.
Yeah.
And I've asked him. I asked him the last time I interviewed him. I asked him to try to kind of explain it on more of a deep level, and he was like, he always just goes like, "I'm a simple man. Like, I just
For
know that
real.
this works. Yeah,
Yes.
we do this and it works."
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
That's such a good point. And for people that may be listening who don't necessarily understand, they're going like, wait. What are you talking about when you're talking about my central nervous system? Right? Maybe some people actually don't even understand what the central nervous system. How do stories affect us? I mean, we're making the connection with the central nervous system, but how do stories affect us? What does the central nervous system have to do with that?
Yeah. Good question. Well, one, we can talk about the two nervous systems, and you may have to correct me because I always switch them up: the parasympathetic and the sympathetic nervous
Correct.
system.
Hmm.
And the sympathetic is the fight or flight, right?
Correct.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So, and this is something that you will start to realize as you start to do this kind of work. Like as you start to do the work of cleaning up your stories, like you start to realize like how the connections happen, like on a feeling level. And like, um, it's things for me, like personally, to like bring it to my personal experience.
Yeah.
Like I've been unwinding a lot of stories about money, you know, and like the stories mostly, what I've come to see is like the deep ones that are like really sticky in the body are often like they're connected to words, but they're like stories that go into this like belief system that's like super deep, where like for example, like I've had a lot of like things that happened in my family that were like intense conflicts over money. Like in my dad's family, like and both my parents' families, like broken relationships between siblings who then never talked to each other for decades, like over money
Wow.
disputes, and like people backstabbing each other, like relatives, like suing other relatives, like people like doing like super shady like business deals to like fuck each other over, like very like a
Hmm.
lot of experiences like this. So there was like a story running in my body. There was like a feeling, like a deep feeling in my nervous system of like money is dangerous. Like if I get money, like people are going to want to fuck me over. Maybe I'll become an asshole if I get money. Like maybe I'll lose it like my grandfather did, and like get swindled by like somebody who I can't trust. Like all these like stories like running in my body that are just imprints from these experiences that I've seen
Hmm.
happen around me. And in coming into like unwriting those, it's like um the doing the process, and this is why the breath is so important, because it's like you can identify that. Like I could tell that story till I'm blue in the face, just verbally, and be like, oh yeah, this and this happened, but now I believe this, and I can say it from this like conscious mind level where I'm like no, like money's fine, it's good, I want it, I can make money, I can like say all of that. But if I don't do this process of dropping into the nervous system and doing this like breathing practice and doing other practices to bring it down into the body, then there's going to be this like nervous system body response, that then it will make me feel like just this intense headwind when I go and try to like figure out my accounting, or like an intense headwind when I try to like ask for more money in a business deal, and like these cues happen in life that are then come in contact with the story, that it's like okay, I want to make my business grow, but I have a story that money's bad. And when those two things collide, it just creates this like grind, and there's like you could like just muscle through it, like maybe that's possible. But I feel like on some level it's like those limiting beliefs, it's like they just block you, and whenever it's like we have all experienced that. It's like getting stage fright, it's like when you're going to present, show yourself in some public way and you freeze. It's like that's your body reaction that's connected to these stories and these nervous system experiences of like where danger is.
Oh man. And Michael was talking about the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems, which are a part of the autonomic nervous system. Autonomic is automatic, right? And so a great example is if remember when you're about to ask that girl out on a date, your palms start getting all sweaty, right? Your body's having a physical reaction to a story you're creating, whether it's her saying no or her saying yes, being really worried about being what you're going to say when you get there. Your body's reacting. Your sympathetic response is coming up because one of the sympathetic responses is perspiration. It's also shaking. It's also vasodilating and pupils getting larger, right? Release of epinephrine, norepinephrine, cortisol, all these things to elevate us. And we can find ourselves getting into this really elevated state. And Michael, one of the things I love that you said, and the image came to me like this, was talking about how, and I have had many clients this way, we have had many clients this way, where they'll be like, oh, I know that about me. I know that about me. And I'm like, do you know that about you? And I had this image when you were talking of like skipping a rock across water, right? That like you're trying to like break a dam by skipping a rock across water. You know, like it's just bouncing over to the other side. Tit, 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 tit. Never wanting to go deep, right? It's until we start going deep and we start getting to the base of that dam and like, wow, there's a blockage here. Let's really start. We got to sink down. And we sink down by if you barely throw a rock, it's going to sink real quick. Yet when people find those stories, those moments, all of a sudden they start going really, really fast. They're like, well, I know that about me. Maybe they laugh, right? They use humor, you know, but that's just how it is. Or my hard chargers be like, well, you know, it is what it is. You know, just got to keep moving, keep chopping, keep going, keep crushing. Both are a response to that fight or flight response, right? I'm either going to be, oh, you know, whatever, flee. Or I'm going to get really upset about it, fight, you know, emotional about it. Yet when we start breathing and we start settling in that middle area, that gray area, now all of a sudden we can start shifting things and changing things. And being able to get to that point can be really difficult. So if there are people out there who know that they have stories like you, right? We all have them. But a story of like, yeah, I do have this like limiting belief about money because of this story. How do they start unwinding this story? Does it start off with the belief like, oh, I'm not good enough, and we go backwards? Why are you not good enough? So on and so forth. Or do we try to think of the story first and then find the limiting belief? How does that work?
Yeah, good question. I found a lot of power in this realm, and this is another thing. I really, again, like just appreciating like Mark's invitation in the way he coached us, in that it's like, okay, this is, you'll develop your own style with it, and I'm sure you've developed your own style of how you integrate it like into the work you do.
Mm-hmm.
And something that I've found super powerful is to couple the story coaching with like a sensing approach, of like feeling the other person's body. And this is like where the
Mm.
physical stuff gets really interesting, of like having a physical practice, having really good diet, cleaning your body out. Because when you clean your body out, your sensitivity, like your body's ability to have like a sensing awareness of another person's body, gets cleaner and sharper. And so it's like when you can feel what's happening in the other person, it's like the way I do it now is like I'll just like come body radar it, where we'll start talking, and it's like I have people do the pre-form and they fill out a thing, and then
Mm-hmm.
it's like okay, and there's like these different things like bouncing around, and I often find that like people will say like, oh, I have this there's like something happening in my career, there's something happening with my finances, there's something happening in my relationships, there's something happening with my health, but they're all interrelated. They're all like in a constellation, that it's like a web that's like interconnected with each other.
Mm.
And so I'll have somebody start talking about it, and I'll like ask them of like, okay, you feel what feels most powerful, what feels most present in your body, and like getting them to like trust in their sensing capacities, of like starting the breathing, like before we've even gone into the story stuff of like, okay, I'm going to have you breathe and like settle into the body. And now you start to feel like where the threads are that are most powerful. And I'll like help
Wow.
guide you in like picking which one is going to be the one that creates an unlock. And in doing that, I often get surprised. It's like I go in and like without so much of an agenda, because it's like sometimes it's like we need to go to like a taproot story that's like something, that an event that happened to you like in the past that is blocked. And sometimes, like often now, like I'll just have people voice from the voice of the like negative critic or whatever it is, or from the
Mm.
voice of my feeling that I have to be responsible for everybody else, or from the voice that says I can't be happy if as long as my mom is there, like whatever the
Mm.
thing is. And then in doing that, and like and being in this like kind of sensing practice with it, and then using the techniques, and like using the techniques as like a structure to carry the whole thing, but really being like very intuitive and like listening to what the person is saying, because sometimes like I did one the other day, and what did he say? My client said uh, he was like telling this story about being responsible for a lot of things, and he got to this one line where he was like, why aren't people helping me? And then we did like a little, we were doing rewrites on the whole thing, and I switched the line to like, why aren't I helping me? you know
Mm-hmm.
and for him, he kind of like breathed, and I saw it register in his body, and he was like very reserved, and he was like, yeah, that lands, which he was saying for like a lot of stuff. And I was like, no, that's like the biggest thing of like all of this. You just told me all these things about like the business you're building, and about you wanting to get married, and about all these things, but it's like that is like the one thing that's like the keystone.
Yes.
And I often find that it will come to that, and like when your sensing is on and you're really dialed into the other person, it will just register really loudly and be like bung, like a silent like bell that's just like that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing. you
Mm-hmm.
know
Mm-hmm.
and then when you can get the other person to like dial into that too, of like kind of turning the volume up on it, of being like, oh, you were just gonna water skip your stone like over the surface, but no, like go deep here, like this is the spot to go deep in. And that's and then also holding this kind of balance with people of like when to be really gentle and when to be really spacious, of like, okay, I'm going to hold you in like whatever feelings are coming up, and then when to be like, no, that we're going to push on that and like go deeper into it and kind of like dom them into it. And
Yes.
there's a gracefulness in that. But
There's
yeah,
a
that's some of
gracefulness in that. There's a gracefulness in that. And
yeah.
and you touched on something that I believe a lot of people are going to relate to here. And that's feelings, emotions. It surprises me, not anymore, but did very much so, on how unattached people are to their emotions. When I say, okay, so tell me how that feels, and they go straight into the logical and they explain something, and I go, whoa, whoa, whoa. Then I'll repeat myself. I'll say, tell me what emotion is coming up. And they'll divert from it again, or not even know how to go happy. And then I have to start going through happy, sad, excited, disappointed, angry, like literally like you would with a kid, right? You got the kid and they got the faces, right? Up on the wall, and you're having to like point, okay, well, what do you feel like right now? That's for real, Michael. Why is it that so many people are unattached or detached from their emotions, that they can't say, boom, right there, man, excited. Ooh, man, I really got that feeling of insecurity there. Why is that?
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think at the most basic level, it's because it's not safe. In most of the environments that we're in, it's not safe. And like, and that's why we have these traumas. It's like,
Mm.
I don't know if you've watched Gabor Mate's Wisdom of Trauma.
Mm-mm.
Amazing, amazing movie. Got to check it out.
Really?
And yeah, one of the things he says in it, which is like something he says a lot, is that trauma is not the terrible things that happen to us. Trauma is the experience of becoming disconnected from ourselves as a result of the terrible thing that happened.
Right.
And so it's like, I think you were touching on earlier, it's like, when animals have like when prey animals like escape from a predator, it's like they shake and they like breathe really hard, and they do something that like physically moves the stress hormones like out of the body. And we don't have space to do that. It's like, okay, your best friend just got laid off from your job, and you show up to work one day and they're just gone, like a ghost that got kidnapped by the KGB, and then
Yeah.
they're just like never there again. It's like, that's fucking traumatizing. But it's like, this is a workplace, it's professional, like no time to process that, get back to work. And so it's like the
Mm.
nervous system doesn't have the space, doesn't have the breathing room to actually process what happened. And like we're in environments like that from so young. It's like when we go to school, it's like there's not safe space for emotions to be processed. Like people talk a lot about safe space now, but it's like what that really means to me is, it's like, can there be breathing room for the feelings that emerge, and like, can there be like an opening for like that processing to happen? Because it's like, we're really resilient, like human beings, like we're incredibly resilient. And
Yes.
like we can go through incredibly traumatic things, and heal from them. But it's like if there's not the right openings made for that healing to have breathing room, then it's going to get locked up in the body. And I don't know if that exactly answered your question. Yeah, I forgot what you said originally.
No, totally, totally answers it, and it actually brings me back around, right? In terms of talking about emotions, right? And what you tapped on was that people don't feel safe. They don't feel safe talking about their emotions because we don't give it to them. When you're a kid, we encourage it, but when you get past a certain age, it's buck up, deal with it, shut your mouth,
Yep.
so on and so forth.
Yep.
So my question to you is what happens when we hold in those emotions? We don't tell those stories. What have you seen, both physically, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, anything? What happens when we hold in those emotions? You talked about animals. They know innately, I got to get this off me. This is deadly and dangerous to me to hold on to the stress. Yet
Mhm.
humans will hold on to it. And then they'll even have that feeling, right, when they're starting to say it or talk, as if there's somebody grabbing onto their throat. Because there's two
Mhm.
different forces that are happening right there, right? This cognitive dissonance that is happening. Yet, what have
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
seen? What can how you in touch on this when it comes to our emotions and stories and us not talking about them? What happens there?
Yeah. One thing that makes me think of is like, watching I'm thinking of like watching the like 2.5-year-old son of some friends of mine, who are going through these like pretty stressful like movements in their partnership. And then I was like watching the son like act out the energy. Like the son is like wow, like laughing and playing and running around and being really like rambunctious. And it's like he's like acting out the stressful energy of the parents, and we use it's even like in the language, it's like acting out is like something that we tell children not to do. It's like, oh, you're acting out, you're being bad, and it's like like as having dogs for a bunch of years, dogs do that too. It's like dogs will act out the energy patterns of the owners, and they're just instinctively doing it. They're not like choosing to do it, they're just acting out the energy. And so it's like when that is like shamed, when we live in a culture where acting out the energy is shamed, it's like then it gets stuck, then it gets frozen. And an interesting thing about this that I've started to notice is like, um, the difference between men and women in the way this goes. And like I've noticed often that doing the story coaching stuff, like women are just better at it. And I think that women are better at it is because there's this cultural conditioning that for women it's like okay to express your feelings, you
Mm-hmm.
know. And like with men it's like there's a lot more like locking down of what you said of like buck up, just deal with it, like you got to be strong, you got to like be stoic and like not show your feelings because it's a sign of weakness, and in some situations like I don't want to say it's a sign of weakness, but in some situations showing your feelings is not smart because it's not safe, because like people will take advantage of you, and like people will manipulate that weakness. But if you're around people who are actually safe to be around, it's like vulnerability is like where our deepest power comes from, actually, because it's like in being able to like express like what's feeling and like letting it move. It's like then it doesn't get stuck in the body. And so like coaching people who are like male leaders and like male CEOs, it's like oftentimes they have a real hard time with this. They may even be like deep feelers, like the same guy who I was coaching the other day I was just talking about. Like I could see him like dropping deep. It's like when he would breathe and like go into feeling it, it's like I could see him like going deep, and then he would have a real hard time like saying it and like going into verbalizing like okay, this is what, and like speaking with a tone that was like actually connected to what the feeling was. Like, man, it's like so challenging for you. And yeah, and a lot of like my female clients, they can often just like drop straight into it, you know and it's like those are the two overreactions on the two sides. Is it's like, and this is like a sweeping generalization that's not true for all people, but
Right,
like
right.
in general, like men tend to block themselves off and not feel, and women tend to get engulfed by the feelings and get overwhelmed by it, and so like when it comes to going into the feelings and moving through them, women just are often naturally more easeful with it because of that, I think. And again, that's a sweeping generalization, and there's
Yeah.
absolutely exceptions to those patterns.
And it's so interesting that you talk about like the emotions of men and women, and having some female clients who are way up there, CEOs themselves, they've actually repressed their emotions because they've gone, oh, I'm in a male dominated world, you don't show
Yes.
your emotions. So now I see the patterning of females who usually are more in touch with their emotions disconnect from the emotions because they're
Yes.
surrounded by it. Yet they have this innate feeling, and when we get on a call, they're just tears just dropping, like they've been wanting to cry for years, years,
Yeah.
because there's like I haven't been able to show that. You don't show that, and to your point, they don't feel safe. They don't
Yeah.
feel safe. And that is
Yeah.
a big, big issue, that if we don't feel safe to express who we are, what we're going through, we're going to continue to hold it in and hold it in and hold it in and hold it in. And one of the things that I want to ask you, I have my own opinion on it, is that if we hold in our emotions, our stories, do you think that it's deadly? Meaning that could kill us?
Definitely. Short answer, definitely. How? Yeah. I mean, I think it can happen in different ways, because I mean, like one example is like my mom getting breast cancer. It's
Mm,
like she had these stories running of like, okay, my mission in life is to run this theater, but also I can't trust anybody else to like run the administrative aspects. So that means I need to do both. And then that just like crushed her into the ground, and she had to like give up this theater that was like, her life for 25 years. And it's like, she's in a much better place now after like moving through that and like letting go of the stories of identity like attached to what this theater was. But yeah, if we don't, and that's another thing, is it's like stories create our identity, but there's a huge power in like being really flexible with it. Of it's
mm,
like, okay, we're gonna like try, and it's like writing a movie that's like ongoing. It's like let's try on new stories like clothes,
yeah,
and if we can be like flexible with those things, then we can adapt to like how our environment is changing, because it's like that's evolution.
yeah.
It's like this, the I think the phrase that everybody says of like survival of the fittest is not actually like accurate to what Darwin said. That it's like the survival of the most adaptable to the environment, and that's something very different. It's like, can we adapt and change like as the environment changes? And it's like all of these patterns too. It's like when the stories get stuck and we can't express, it's like we're talking about these practices to unlock those, but it's like in the moment that was actually like an appropriate defense mechanism of the body. It was the body doing something to like avert like a deeper level of injury to happen. And then as we're like, becoming more conscious of these processes, and we can learn to like unwrite them, it's like, yeah, then we can unblock it. But yeah, I mean, I think that also, like, there's this, in Western medicine, we're very focused on like the physical, on like the cause and effect of like the mechanisms of the physical
Big
body,
time.
which Western
Yes.
medicine is great at, is really good at that.
Right.
But then there's, in Chinese medicine, there's this idea of like these like Wei Qi fields, and like in there's like these three Wei Qi fields, and you have the first one is like connected to your physical body, and it's just like on your physical body. And then there's like kind of an outer layer one that's like your emotions and like your like relationships with people in your life and things like that. And then there's like an outer one that's like, your connection to your ancestors and like connection to like society and like these like
Mm,
bigger things. And like whether that's like literally true or not, they have, and then they have this understanding of like things can come in, and as they penetrate down like closer through the Wei Chi fields, when it gets into the closest one, then it starts to manifest as like a disease. But once it's like manifesting as a disease, it's like already really embedded. It's already like gone pretty far like down the process. And so they're like tracking like, okay, how do you catch these things before they become like a physical illness? And I think like because people are so blocked and so don't have a lot of literacy around these areas, it's like you can go for a long time in life and like not examine those things and not examine them, and it's like they're okay, and then it like gets deeper and deeper and deeper into the system until the point that like now you're having kidney failure and you like need to get surgery and you have to like really examine it, and your body is like forcing you to look at it now, and but that I've come to think, and this is my belief, is my personal belief, that the physical conditions are always a manifestation of something that's happening, in this emotional realm, like in this like in this like story realm, and then when it doesn't go examined, I do think it can manifest as like a physical illness, and then if you continue to not address it, then for sure you can die from it.
Oh man, anything that sits for a long period of time is going to go stale, mold, grow, whatever the case and scenario may be. And that includes our energy with life, with ourselves. When the channel from head, heart, and stomach is blocked in any way, we are going to start creating stale energy, moldy energy, energy that does not flow. It stays there long enough, exactly what you're talking about here. It's going to manifest. And to the point, once more, I have watched people, it happened today, started shaking. When we started breathing and we started addressing the imposter, shaking started happening. She wasn't physically trying to shake it off. She was shaking. Because this is something that has been blocked up for such a long, long time. And getting the ability to be able to move that energy starts again, like we said from the beginning of this podcast, you will always have control of two things. Everything else could go awry. Your thoughts, your mind, and your breath till the day you die. You have the ability to be able to control those two things. You might not be able to control your environment. You might break your leg. Your arms might fall off. You might be in a wheelchair for the rest of your life. You might lose everything, money and all, but you still have your words, you still have your breath. And if we can focus on that, we can create a very clear channel to the point, as you guys have heard me say so many times, and you guys might think that I'm joking, you guys might think that I'm crazy. This is the best day I've ever lived. I've cleared my junk. I've gotten my energy straight. I eat the right foods. I take care of my body mentally, emotionally, psychologically. I've put in the work. And I know tomorrow is not guaranteed. 178,000 people will die today. 120 people a minute. We've been here for an hour. Tens of thousands of people have died already around the world. It's not the best day ever, really. You're still breathing. And when we can tap into that energy, all things can start flowing incredibly well. And Michael, I got a question here. You said you were bringing up about our environment, right? And adaptability to our environment. Can we adapt to our environment without changing our story or our limiting beliefs?
I mean, my first gut response is no.
Mine too.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't know. Like, if forever, until the end of time, like, is that true? I don't know. But my sense is no, because it's like, it's the story is the coding, it's like you can have your, the most amazing, like I'm a video editor. I have a deluxe laptop. I have
Mm-hmm.
this like super expensive machine with a ton of storage, and it's really fast with a great graphics card. And if I put MS DOS on this laptop, it's only going to run MS-DOS programs, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like the story is what writes the operating system. It's like the
Mm-hmm.
story is the software, so it's like we can take all the action we want in the physical world, but it's like if we're not rewriting those stories, there's just going to be like a hard cap on like what we can do. And like
Mm-hmm.
and but it's really also powerful when they come together. It's like when we
Yes.
can meet commitment and action with the story work, with unwriting our beliefs. And they kind of like they I found that they kind of they like slingshot off of each other, and like my fiance and I, we run some leadership development programs together with her company called Wayfinding, and one of the things that she talks about a lot is bids for power, which is like this idea of like, okay, we're constantly making these bids for power. Of it's like, what's the next move that's going to like stretch me that little bit, that's going to,
Mm.
asking for something a little bit more, shooting for something a little bit more. We can have these like really big goals, but it's like setting these like bids for power that are like, it's like, okay, how do I ask for a raise and like demonstrate my value at work? How do I, and sometimes it's these big things like I'm going to quit my job and start my own business or something like that.
Right.
But these bids for power, as they intersect with our story work, because it's like when we go for a bid for power, it brings up all the places where we're blocked. It's like we
Mm-hmm.
go to try to do something, we go to try to hit a fitness goal of
Yeah.
some kind, and then we get into the actual discipline or the practice, and then that's when the block stories come up. Because if we're just doing nothing and like not trying to live our full potential, it's like the stories aren't going to bother us. They only start activating our nervous system when they come in contact with us trying to do something differently. So
Mm.
it's like that meeting. And like I love that you're talking about that. It's like that meeting of the commitment. It's like, how do I have the commitment to like show up every day and then like unlock the stories so that is like feeling really good. And I actually, because it's like, why are we not excited about discipline? It's like, why do we feel
Mm.
that that's something that's painful? you know
Mm.
it's like discipline and being our best selves every day should be joyful.
Mm.
And it's like, I think the reason that it's not is because like our attempts to meet something with an action hits these stories which are connected to like old pains and traumas.
Mm. Yes. Yes. And that's one of the things I was touching on earlier was that cognitive dissonance, right? Cognitive dissonance is when action and belief aren't aligned, right? Is that I smoke and I believe smoking is bad. They hit together every time I light up a cigarette, and I have this guilt or this doubt or this whatever. And so with cognitive dissonance, you have this like, this doesn't feel good. And you could create a story, or you could create a limiting belief, like I'm just addicted as it is what it is, right? That's going to be a limiting belief. You could take an action, which is I'm throwing all the cigarettes away. I'm going out into the mountains for 30 days where I can't smoke anything, and I'm going to break it. Or we can dive into the belief and change the belief. What would happen if we released those cigarettes, the addiction, the trauma, the story, and we change the belief where I don't smoke cigarettes? And there has been people literally that I know who smoked cigarettes for years, even decades, and then just one day, I don't smoke cigarettes. Their belief changed. Boom. Just like that. Wasn't a magic pill, wasn't anything crazy. They had cognitive dissonance. Something happened. They said, time to change. And unfortunately, a lot of people will continue with cognitive dissonance, have that internal trauma, continue to compound it until it is cancer, until it is heart disease, until it is 50 pounds overweight, until it is these things. And they get pigeonholed of, I either need to stop doing this, take the action, or I'm going to die. An example of your mom. And so your mom actually has a very unique story that I believe a lot of people can resonate with, and we can use somebody else too. Yet, can we give a real life example about the connection of our stories and our limiting beliefs? Do you have a way to be able to show people a to the point that they might be like, oh shoot, that makes a lot of sense for me.
Uh, you mean in terms of like how it like manifests in someone's life?
Yeah. So why do people have limiting beliefs? Like, why do they have, like, speaking of your mom, right? She had to do both things because what you said, she didn't trust other people to do it. Why didn't she trust other people to do it? Right? The belief was, I don't trust people to do it. Or talk about the CEO or the business owner, right? Nobody does as good as I do. Why doesn't everyone do it as good as you do? Where does that come from? Being able to show that correlation for people, because a lot of people, they just think, again, they just create the identity and that's just who I am. I'm just a control freak. I'm just crazy. You know me, I'm just crazy. Who told you you were crazy? Right? But being able to
Yeah.
get, that's what I'm saying, being able to give an example, whether
Yeah.
people you've coached or personally, of that
Yeah.
like playback.
Yeah, totally, totally. Yeah, and I love what you said. I just want to like point to something else you said as you were talking. That there's a big difference between your clients who said, "I don't smoke cigarettes," and saying, "I won't smoke cigarettes anymore." Because saying "I don't smoke cigarettes" is an identity. I am not a person who smokes cigarettes. Versus saying "I won't smoke cigarettes anymore" is like an action that I'll take in the future. Like much less power in that. And so it's like when does the story become something that's just a mantra that's repeated, and then when does it become embedded into the identity? Because it's like when the story lands in the identity, then it's like really shaping your reality. And like in terms of your question of like how do the limiting beliefs like shape people, I think it's that cognitive dissonance is really like the thing that I'm always looking for. Like now that you're saying it, that it's like where is there a cognitive dissonance in the storytelling about someone's life, and like this client that I was just working with, he's telling me about this business that he's creating, which I think has the potential to be this like huge thing. And uh, as he's describing it to me, he's like, okay, we're going to grow it, we're going to get investment, and then also at the same time there's this like underlying story that like capitalism is evil, you know and that like money is bad. And it's like he had done two previous startups that had like been fucked over like by capitalism, in his words. And I was like, oh, there's like a trauma that you experienced, and now you've like told a story to yourself that capitalism is evil, and yet you're trying to make a business that's going to become like a huge publicly traded company. And like so there's just this like incongruency. And so like in the work we're doing, it's like, no, we have to focus on that. Like I can't help you start to make media for your company or start to like do the public storytelling to like investors and stuff until you figure that out. Because if that story is running in the background, like I can see, like when I watch him, and it's like I haven't even talked to any of his team, I haven't done any kind of like actual in-depth consulting for him. But it's like when I hear him talk about it, I'm like, I can see that you're running at like less than 5% capacity in terms of like what you're producing, because of that like blockage that's in there, because there's
Wow.
something in your nervous system that's so deep that's not going to let you make this company succeed, because on this deeper subconscious level you believe that capitalism is evil, and that if you make money that it's going to be really painful again, you know and and then it's like it's some of it is just like going back to like examining those events and being like, well, were your previous startups really fucked over by capitalism, or were they fucked over by bad agreements that you made, you know, with people that maybe didn't have your good intentions. And so it's like this is where the nuance gets really powerful too, of like, can we actually zero in? Because it's like when we have a trauma response, we tend to think in black and white, and we tend to generalize everything.
Yeah.
And so whenever I hear someone making a sweeping generalization like that, of like capitalism is evil, or like I'm afraid of money, or it's like you're just casting the whole story like over the entire realm of
Yes.
like money or relationships or whatever it is, or going into this black and white thinking, like I either have to make this business succeed, or I have to leave and declare bankruptcy. It's like when I see people going into that kind of thinking, it's like trauma response. There's for
Yes.
sure a trauma response happening. Because it's like in reality, there's always infinite possibilities.
Mm-hmm.
Just period. There's
Yeah.
always infinite possibilities. There's like any number of ways that you could run things. You could change things about how you work. You could change things about so many things. But then when we get locked into these feelings of like, oh, the entire realm of falling in love is going to be painful, or like something like that, it's just going to, like, our whole body is going to be averse to it. And like something that I've been saying to people who are that works for people who are very mental in the way they process information, is it's just like, your conscious mind can process like 40 pieces of information a second, but your subconscious mind can process 11 million pieces of information a second. And so like really your subconscious is running the show. And like
Mm-hmm.
there's no getting around that. And so it's like you can think that you're taking actions and you can think that you're making progress, but if your subconscious is blocked, if your body reaction is blocked
Yes.
to something
Yes.
happening, like
Yes.
it's not going to happen.
Yes.
This period. Yeah.
Ugh. You guys, some of this might be really new to you. Some of this might be going like, whoa, what? Yet, this is the work that Michael and I do, right? This is what the work that we do at Proclivity. And when we watch people get through their limiting beliefs, there's a massive change. There's a massive change. And so, my question to you, Michael, is people who are listening, how do they break through these limiting beliefs? What is it that they're leaning in? They're going like, oh, whoa, you've said a lot of different things that really captured my attention. Like, how do I do this? How do I start breaking through? I'm ready now. What is it that they can do? What's tangible things that they can do if we were going to say, hey, here are 3 things for you to be able to start doing now?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'd say one, work with you. Work with
I received that.
Proclivity for sure. Yeah, I mean, it's like if you're starting to feel that your stories are blocked, it's like you can do some of the process yourself. And I've like given people like document tools to do it,
Mm-hmm.
where you can like do a process where you like write out your story. You do some breathing, you start to like
Mm-hmm.
rewrite it. Like you can kind of intuitively do that yourself. And like I've gotten to the point where like I have huge unlocks with my clients when I do this work, and it's hard for me to do it for myself. Like
Yeah,
it's challenging. It's different when there's another person who's holding you through it,
that's right.
and you can just surrender into the process and let them be in the steering seat. And
Mm-hmm.
then you can kind of like let go into the sensing and just the writing, and have the other person like going into the like analyzing the story for you. Because when you're in that yourself, when you're trying to switch back and forth between these two different modes of like the feeling it and then the trying to analyze like what needs to be
Yeah.
changed about it, you're not like really dropping like deep into the nervous system change. So like work with a coach who knows how to do this, one, to unlock the stories for sure. And then two, I would say, as one of the things I'm working on in my this recent documentary that I'm going into is like
Mm-hmm.
is finding like what are the pieces, like what are the key elements that really cause these unlocks. And I've started to see patterns like across people that I've met, where it's like there's like some sort of story awareness, there's some sort of awareness of changing identity, there's breath work, there's nutrition, there's
Mm-hmm.
martial arts practice,
Yes.
there's like being in relationships, there's these different things. And like I could give a list, I could rattle on for so long about like, okay, you should like to do this kind of thing for your body, you should like do this martial arts practice, you should like go
Mm-hmm.
to this like coaching program. But really, like I found that the sweet sauce for me is to be, again, like keep dialing into the sensing, because it's like the
Mm.
sensing that's like the compass, that's like your heart's compass, and
Yeah.
you'll feel things like maybe you're feeling things right now listening to this podcast of like, wow, this proclivity stuff like really feels like it's up my alley, like I should go do this. If you're feeling that draw to it, like listen, you got to listen to it.
Yeah.
And it's like listening to those invitations, because your body is like cueing you, your body will always be cueing you to like what's the next thing that's right for you for your healing.
Mm.
And sometimes it's like mysterious, because sometimes it's like, and people can often like not trust their sensing, because they'll be like, oh, I followed my sensing, but then something bad happened. and it was painful. And so that means my sensing must have been wrong, but it's like also, again, it's like stepping into a different story around that. That it's like,
Yes.
oh no, how is life always serving you? How is your intuition always been guiding you towards exactly what you need? And then when you start to like get into that frame of mind and like look back and be like, oh, there actually were no mistakes in my whole life, and everything was leading me to this moment. Everything was leading you here to this moment to hear these words.
Yes. Yes.
you know
Yes.
and it's like listening to that, and then it's like a muscle. You got to strengthen it. It's like you got to strengthen listening to the sensing by following it, by continuing to listen to it, and then you'll be presented. It's like you'll find the teachers, you'll find the trainings. It's like you'll find the opportunities that are right for you, because it's different for each person. I'm going to make a whole documentary series about like what are some of the biggest levers you can pull. But yeah, I would say that's kind of the core. That's the core. And I don't know if that was three, but that was some pieces.
You had subcategories to two that equal the
Yeah,
third one right there,
yeah,
because you
I think
talked
that
about
counts.
a multitude of different things there. And one of the things I really, really, really love that you said, there's things that we touched here, multiple things, but one of the things we talked about was us detaching from our emotions, detaching from ourselves, detaching from our bodies, and not giving ourselves a moment to feel our bodies. First thing I do, and I tell everybody who works with me, first thing I do when I wake up in the morning, first I show gratitude. I want to boost the serotonin. So I throw my hands in there and I go, yes. Doesn't matter if I'm sick, doesn't matter if business isn't going the way it's supposed to, a relationship broke up, it doesn't matter. Hands go in there and go, oh my gosh, I cheated death once more. I get another day. Oh, you better watch out, world. And I literally throw my pillows on the ground, right? To be able to I'm out throwing my pillows on the ground like, yes, right? But when I stand up, I put my hand on my heart and my hand on my belly, and I take some breaths to feel into my body. First thing, body, what are you telling me? What are you telling me? And I go throughout my day, and at the very end of the night, after I've done some reading, I do the same thing. Hand on heart, hand on belly. Body, what are you telling me? And I never used to do that, Michael. I would be going 60 hours a week, hammering, CrossFit, gas pedal down. 7 years I had a gluten intolerance, and I would have diarrhea 3 to 4 times a week.
Oh man.
Gas pedal. I'm just gas pedaling. I don't got time for that. So I'm not, my body's literally like, dude, you're having diarrhea 4 times a week. Are you not listening to me? Yet so many of us just keep driving forward, and then we wonder why. We wonder why the weight gain. We wonder why the high blood pressure. We wonder why the relationships that's failing, or our kids not loving us, or us not loving ourselves. We're not stopping for a moment to be able to breathe and feel. And I'm so glad that you brought that to the forefront. This podcast, man, has been so special to me. You have helped me many times. You have a very unique gift of tuning in to emotions, to other people. That is a God-given gift, and I'm so glad that you're continuing it and you're doing it with your work. And if people want to get a hold of you, want to talk to you, how do people reach out and talk to Mike?
Thank you. Yeah, and before I share my stuff, I'll just like say back to you, it's like, yeah, every time I talk to you, I just feel so uplifted. And you just saying like, yeah, today's the greatest day of my life. I'm like, yeah, like I get that feeling every time I talk to you. I'm like, oh yeah, that's right. Fuck yeah. Like,
Yeah, let's go.
yeah. And that's one of your gifts, is like just bringing that like buoyancy into like all these interactions that you have. It's really beautiful, man.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, in terms of where people can find me, my website is 1111productions.org. It's 4 1s, productions.org. And it's like I would say it's my kind of like round one website that has a lot of my film work on it, and like just basic stuff about me. It doesn't have a lot of stuff about this kind of coaching method, which is what I'm taking my clients through. And like the
That's
work
great.
I'm doing now, it's like I do one-on-one coaching with people, but it's really starting to move into like helping organizations, that have a mission to structure their story, go through this kind of like story work process with the leader or leadership, then go into actually make, grounding it, like bringing it into the actual,
Mm-hmm.
creation of content,
Mm-hmm.
and then figuring out how to distribute it, because that's another thing I'll just say briefly, the other place to find me is through the work I do with my partner Larissa at wayfinding.io. And
Yes.
it's these leadership programs that are super powerful. And it's like we go into helping leaders in the business world understand how to live their life in proper rhythms.
Mm-hmm.
Understand that there's like patterns in nature that we can bring into the way that we live. And it's like what you were saying about like so many people have their foot on the gas pedal. It's like nature doesn't operate like that. It's like nature
Right.
has these seasonal rhythms. It's like there's a springtime of like growth, and like that's the startup energy, and then the
Mm-hmm.
summertime where it's like, okay, getting into the movement and the perspiration to make things happen. And then most businesses like either sell off there or just stay in the summertime mode forever. you know but it's like we
Yes.
got we got to go through the cycle. It's like you have to go into harvest and reflection, this like autumn energy, and then go into rest in this like winter energy.
Yes.
And it's like when we go all the way around the cycle, all the way through the seasons, it's like then we have this like not perspiration, respiration, and
Yes.
we're able to breathe, and then like gather like the learnings from what's happened, because it's like we can feel like we're making progress. It's like those 7 years you probably felt like you were making a lot of progress,
Mm-hmm.
but there's a way it may have been like you're actually going in a circle,
Right.
rather than going in an upward spiral.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
so there's all kinds of techniques and patterns, and like coaching methods for helping people to unlock this. And yeah, I just appreciate you so much, and thank you so much for having me on your show.
Oh man, guys, definitely check out Wayfinding as well. Um, Michael and his partner. What's your fiance's name again?
Larissa.
Larissa are doing some really cool stuff, and being able to help people decompress, touch into themselves. Like it just really really cool stuff. So definitely check them out too as well. Michael, man, it's been a pleasure as always. Thank you so much for being on the Proclivity podcast. You guys check out Michael. Dude is so rad. We bring on rad people onto the Proclivity podcast who love life like we love life. And again, if you like what you've listened to, or you're interested in getting deeper into your story, reach out to us, www.proclivity.co. You get a 45-minute free clarity call with Emily and I. We're going to touch on the stories. We're going to touch on the identity. We're going to touch on the nutrition. It's an incredible symphony of being able to create the healthier body and happier life so that you too can live your best day ever.
Fantastic. Yeah, thank you, Joel.
All right.
Everybody go do Proclivity.
Yes, I received that. All right, brother. I'll talk to you soon, guys. We'll see you in the next episode.